But it's also because of the continuing manifest destiny that comes out in U.S. foreign policy year after year. It comes out with the missionary nature, the evangelical nature of the U.S. political system, with the belief that we are the essence of good, and that we have to spread this good to other peoples. All of these programs in the early 1960s and extending through the 1960s were, in one form or another, a policy of state-sponsored terrorism against Cuba. When I was in the CIA's operations training program, before I went first to South America, in 1960, I was at a secret CIA training base called Camp Perry, which is just outside Williamsburg, Virginia. And at this training base, we were taught to run and develop secret operations and all the ways to keep them secret, what is known in the business as tradecraft. Among the subject matter were explosions, that is, the use of explosives, of incendiary devices, of weapons, and so forth. And I remember in March of 1960, our instructors in sabotage could not conceal their happiness, their glee, when the news got back from Havana of the destruction of the French cargo vessel, Le Coubre, in Havana Harbor. It was unloading a shipment of arms from Belgium when there was a huge explosion which killed the crew and the stevedores doing the unloading. The fire brigade came along with militia to try to put out this enormous blaze, which was occurring at a wharf right next to the main Havana railway station. And about an hour after the first explosion, another and even larger explosion occurred, which killed the fire brigade people and the militia that were assisting in putting out fire. Altogether, more than 100 people were killed in that blast, and hundreds were injured. If you drive down along the Port Avenue right now to the main railway station, on the left, right where that ship was docked, there is a sculpture made of scrap steel, which was taken from the ship, and it includes the rudder. It is a memorial now, and since then, to all those people who died in that CIA sabotage operation. I went down to Ecuador toward the end of 1960, and I was there working as an operations officer based in the United States Embassy, undercover as a political officer and assistant attaché. And I remember very well that a week or so before the Bay of Pigs invasion, the news came out from Havana that the most important, the largest, and recognized as the best department store in the city was burned down. It was called El Encanto. And I had shopped there on my first trip to Havana in early 1957. That, too, was a CIA sabotage operation. And it was carried out through the confection of dolls made of an incendiary powder, made to look exactly like dolls that the department store sold. And at the given time, these dolls exploded. I worked with this incendiary material. It was like powder, but when you set it off, it was a huge explosion, like a bomb practically. But one woman was killed in that sabotage operation, was killed in the blaze, and her name was Fidel Valle. Now, every time I drive up Galeano on my way to Chinatown for lunch, for example, I pass Fidel Valle Park, which is where El Encanto once stood, and where it stood when I got there in 1957. Altogether, during this 45-year war against Cuba, undeclared war against Cuba, nearly 3,500 Cubans have been killed. More than 2,000 Cubans have been disabled for life. From the 1980s until well into the 21st century, Cuban-American extremists of the first generation of immigrants has been controlling the United States policy toward Cuba. And this policy is of the most extremist and uncompromising type. They are insistent that Americans not be allowed to travel to Cuba. They are insistent that every measure be taken to to undermine and to squeeze and to destroy the Cuban economy. Economic warfare is another example of how this undeclared war against Cuba has been carried out. And the purpose of this economic warfare, which has never really ended, is to squeeze the people. That is, to turn them against the revolution, to make them suffer to the point where they will tire of it and they will turn against the revolution. That's the point of economic warfare, because it is meant to affect the whole population, and not just, let's say, the government or the revolutionary leadership or the revolutionary party, for example. But where Cuba is concerned, these operations to develop a political opposition received major emphasis from the 1990s on into the 21st century. And AID in recent years, this is, let's say, from 1998 on, has spent nearly $30 million on Cuban programs. And most of this money is paid to support what has become a cottage industry of NGOs, most of them based in Miami. All of these things have been carried out against Cuba through the years. And until the United States determines that Cuba should have a right to make its own decisions on the type of political and social system that it wants, these things are going to continue. By the time the Batista dictatorship was overthrown, the Cubans knew what to expect from the United States. They knew the United States would try to repeat here in Cuba what they had successfully carried out in Guatemala 5 years earlier. Che, of course, was part of the revolution here, and he knew what had happened in Guatemala, so did the rest of the leadership, and so they knew they had to be prepared for aggression from the United States. As recent as April 2003, the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, based in Fort Lauderdale, carried a large reporting section on the training outside Miami in the Everglades of a group called the